Well, that was fun, Nuggets fans. Nuggets Knicks postgame is coming your way, presented by Trusted American Mortgage. I'm Brandon Cristal, not Liv Moods. Liv is under the weather. She is trying to fight off the flu. She does not have COVID. I know she took a COVID test, but our friends from Trusted American Mortgage always bring you the Nuggets postgame show. And so we are going to get into it. And I know plenty of people have plenty of thoughts, including what was going on with Michael Malone in the timeouts. So let's hit it.
Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome to it, Nuggets fans. And I know you've got plenty of venting to do, so I'm going to fire the comments up because we are just going to jump right into it. 122, 112. The Nuggets go to the Garden, the most famous arena in the world. Did not go great. And it was interesting watching the game because right from the jump, Joker gets those two quick foul calls. And so what happens? Of course, he has to go to the bench. They give up a 15-0 run, and you're thinking, man, this could get out of hand. But in the first quarter, they're able to scratch and claw and fight. And it's a 4-point game after one. And then as they get into the second quarter, it's still close. And Joker comes back into the game. It was somewhere right around 4 or 6, give or take. And that, I think, set you up for the halftime, which had, what was it, a 6-point deficit, 60-54. Then the third quarter got even weirder. You also had Karl Anthony Towns, the second best player on New York, get into foul trouble in the second quarter with some dumb fouls. And in the third, the Nuggets are able to jump up to a 9-point lead, but then end up trailing by 7 after 3. And in the fourth quarter, I think the turning point, and you had dumb turnovers throughout, and I understand the NBA can be full of that. But the turning point, you get an easy layup as Russ pushes the pace, gets it to AG, and cuts that to 4. And next thing you know, it's a 10-point game. And that's kind of how it felt all game long. So I'm going to jump right to these comments because I know that you guys have plenty to get off your chest, and we're going to try to work through this because this road trip is not going well. 0-3, tough loss to Minnesota, dumb loss to the Bulls where you let them make obviously far too many threes, and if you just make 2 more, it's a different game. But this from BM, this game was all Malone and Yoke and MPJ. Malone in the timeouts, it's worth questioning. It is worth questioning, and I think that he was so frustrated. And you got to remember, the Garden means certain things to certain people. But to Michael Malone, who grew up in New York and New Jersey and whose dad coached for the Knicks, if I do the math, probably he ended up on Van Gundy's staff either right as Malone was either in college or getting right out of college, I guess, doing the math on when his dad was with the Knicks. The Garden probably means more to him than any basketball arena in the world, this side of Ball Arena, which is obviously his home arena where he's been for a decade, and they've had so many wins and so many great moments. And so with friends and family certainly there, you could just sense the frustration with Malone kind of from the jump. And so it was on him some. MPJ, when you look at 9 points, 3 of 8, 1 of 5 from 3. Jamal Murray took a bunch of shots, but he's over 50%, 13 of 25. He hits 3 of 7 threes. He's doing his best to keep you in the game, but just some of those dumb turnovers really bother me. And then Joker, because of the foul trouble, and then he just didn't want to get going. And so I think this is a fair potential criticism from Mr. Exquisite Nugget. It's weird to think that the Joker's scared of anyone, but with Karl Anthony Towns, and I feel like Rudy Gobert played into that, although the Knicks have a toughness. I think it starts with their coach and Tom Thibodeau and Jalen Brunson, even though he grew up son of an NBA player. There's a toughness to how he plays, and I think that they kind of just feed off that. And it's not the toughest Knicks team you'll ever see, but there's a toughness. And Cat, who grew up in Jersey and isn't necessarily the toughest player, he played really well against the Nuggets in that series, obviously, when Minnesota beat them in the second round last year, and especially once they made that switch where Cat was on Joker and Rudy got to basically play free safety, and it really changed the dynamic of that playoff series. And so the idea that Joker's scared of anyone seems crazy, but he was missing some silly layups. And even when Cat wasn't in there, he gets guys switched on him. He has OG Anunoby on him or Bridges, and he's missing layups. When Joker's 6 of 15, it's not your night, even though he's only -3, added 6 boards, 6 assists. But when you get 30 and 15 to Jalen Brunson, and then Cat, who wasn't great, was good enough, but had the 10 boards to go with 14 points, and OG Anunoby, 23 points. The Knicks are going to be a tough out in the playoffs. If they're healthy, they weren't last year, and I realize it's not exactly the same team, but they just weren't healthy, and they weren't able to do anything, and then Brunson gets hurt, has to have that offseason surgery. So the Nuggets have to rally now. They have 2 more games on this road trip. They go, I know they end in Charlotte, and then they have got, one more. Let's see, where do they go next? They go, I should know this, on Friday they are in Philly. And so we know that Joel Embiid's not playing, even without, I guess we can't swear anything's possible, but they'll go to Philly and certainly have a chance to get on track, although you would have thought they would have gotten on track Monday against Chicago. And the Bulls let them hang around, even though the Bulls made 24 threes. The Nuggets killed them in the paint, and the Nuggets were ultimately right there. Tonight, though, credit to the Knicks and their ability every time the Nuggets got close to force the Nuggets into some sort of turnover or play good defense and then get an easy bucket on the other side. That's probably going to bother Malone as much as anything. And I'm sure if we go into the numbers of fast break points, which the Nuggets are the best team in the league in fast break points, there's no way that tonight it was anywhere near in their favor. And so it felt like every time the Nuggets kept it close, not only would the Knicks get a score, they'd then come down and force in a miss or a turnover and get an easy run out. And I think if you're watching the ESPN broadcast, which I caught a little bit of, but you heard Jay Billis, he's like, 1 on none is the best matchup possible. And so I think that that's going to eat at Malone probably more than anything. So I'll continue to get to your comments as they come in and look at things that are positive. I think that the positivity has to come from the way they played before they hit the road, and to know that this is one of their longest road trips of the year, if not the longest. Friday in Philly, Saturday in Charlotte, and they come home and it's Pelicans. We know Zion's back on the court, but you get Pelicans, and then the Thursday game. I'm drawing a blank on who that is right now either. You think I have this memorized, but you can get back on track. And so I think that you have to look at what you've done well. And so you're probably saying, at least we made it close. Our non-Joker minutes didn't kill us tonight. Julian Strother played good defense. You saw the block that he had in the first half. Now, he didn't shoot the ball well. Nobody shot the ball well. As a team, you'll take 10 of 28 from 3 as opposed to 6 of 24 or whatever they were. They make 10 threes against the Bulls, they win. But the Knicks, who aren't shooting the 3 anywhere near the way, say, Boston shoots it, or as many times as we saw the Bulls shoot it, or of course Cleveland, they go 14 of 34, and so that's almost your difference right there at 41% and making 4 more threes, taking 6 more. The Nuggets were really good at the line, which is something where they haven't always been, and the Knicks only got to the line 18 times, and so I think that overall it becomes what can we take out of this that we like, and what are the things that you're worried are going to stay with you? And so I think that the defense on the perimeter is a problem. And you can look at Monday, and then this was also, and this is the first time that we're now getting into this too. We saw Aaron Gordon back in the starting lineup. He ends up playing 30 minutes. So the minutes restriction appears to be off. That means Christian Brown comes off the bench. Now, Christian played 29 minutes, and Christian will finish plenty of games too. And we know that CB's been playing some of his best basketball. He was minus 18 tonight, though, and plus minus. He had 13 points and 5 assists. The Nuggets, though, when you get 4 turnovers from Westbrook, another 3 from Jamal, and your assist numbers are nowhere near where they normally are. You only had 21 assists, and the Knicks had 33. And you're just not going to win games like that. And so the Nuggets were solid on the glass. They out rebounded them by 12, but it's just not enough. And so you weren't sure what the toughest game on the road trip would be going into it. I thought this was going to be it. They hung tough with them. The Minnesota loss hurts because you had a lead there. And then the worst loss to this point is obviously Monday. You knew it was going to be tough in the Garden because it always is, at least in recent years with this version of the Knicks. And it's a Garden. Guys love playing in the Garden. And if you've been lucky enough to go to a game there, you understand why. If you haven't, you should go check out a game there. And so it's just frustrating to see a team that was playing so well in January have this stretch here on the road where it's just not clicking. And Michael Malone, the little bit of hair that he has left, and I'm not picking on his hair, he certainly has more than enough, but it's not the longest. He's got to be pulling it out. And this is not going to be an easy trip down to, I imagine they're staying in New York tonight, and then they'll head down to Philly tomorrow. But he's going to be up all night, I think, probably as he continues to try to figure out why does his team not want to play defense on the perimeter. And so I think that this point is fair. The Nuggets defense failed again because they couldn't do anything with Jalen Brunson. And I get that he's a tough cover. He's an all-star starter. The Knicks have 2 all-star starters. But if they're not slowing Jalen Brunson down, what are they going to do when they get to OKC and have to figure out how to slow SGA down in the playoffs? Or we haven't even seen a version of the Grizzlies with Ja. That's not going to be fun for anyone. And they're different kind of players. I understand that. But Jalen was getting to whatever spot he wanted. He was able to get into the paint. He was able to score from wherever. And so it's got to be really concerning that you can't get a stop when you need it. And I think that was the biggest thing. And so I go back to that point where it was either what was it, 110 to 106, and all of a sudden it's 116 to 106, and the Nuggets just run out of steam. So this conversation is going to continue to come up, though. And so Mr. Exquisite Nugget asks, who should we trade for? I don't know if the Nuggets are going to be that active. And it's not that they don't want to be active. They just don't have a lot of assets. And this is probably worth noting, too, because with the De'Aaron Fox stuff coming out, that he is likely to be traded, or certainly the Kings are looking at the trade block to see, or to put him on the trade block and see what trade partners are out there, because he's going to be a free agent and they don't think they'll re-sign him or that he wants to re-sign or any of that. And you can't really franchise a guy the way you can say in the NFL. Then what can you get for him? You can't trade Jamal Murray for De'Aaron Fox. And I don't know why we didn't necessarily remember that, but based on his new deal, the Jamal Murray new contract, he can't be traded until the offseason, I believe. But he definitely can't be traded before the trade deadline. And so this comment comes in from everyone's favorite Nuggets postgame host. Liv might be under the weather, but she's still able to get those fingers working. And so she says, do you think Malone's lost his team? I'll say this, and I heard this reaching out to some folks that are a part of the team. There is potentially a disconnect in the locker room with how Michael Malone treats Jamal Murray and how he treats the rest of the team. And I don't want to say that he babies Jamal or lets him do other things. He's not trying to let him fly on his own. I understand flying to the Garden for a fight is one thing, but he's not having him meet the team and do the Jimmy Butler kind of stuff, as Jimmy's clearly trying to get himself traded, all of that. But we have to keep an eye on this, but are there some rumblings? I heard there may be some rumblings that Malone is getting on the team, but not getting on Jamal enough when it's an effort question, especially defensively. And so I think that that's something to keep an eye on, but you also have to assume, and I have a friend who played college basketball at the highest level and was one of the best players in the country and had a top 10 pick on his team. And his coach, whenever he wanted to yell at the best player, yelled at my friend who was the second best player to get the message through because he couldn't yell at him. And so I'm saying that to say Malone's been with Jamal Murray for almost a decade. And he's obviously been with Joker a decade. He knows what buttons to push with certain people. He knows how far he can push Joker. We'll go all the way back to Tim Duncan's time in San Antonio and hearing that Popovich could get on Duncan and thus he could get on Manu Ginobili and Parker. And because of that, everyone fell in line. So even though Malone can get on Joker, he doesn't really have to, but he could. And I think Joker would be fine with it, or he'll yell back. Malone may know that he can't get on Jamal. And that doesn't necessarily sit well with his teammates, especially when they're young guys or they haven't been around a long time or whatever it may be, or they haven't been around the team for a while. That can rub people the wrong way, even though you have to assume that Malone knows how to deal with his players, especially the guys he's had the longest, like Joker, Jamal, and MPJ. And so I'm going to give Malone the benefit of the doubt. But to this question, do you think he's lost the team? I don't, because I'm not sure he ever had him, if that makes sense. The defensive buy-in just hasn't been there. And so they're waiting to be able to turn the switch on and keep it on. And they just haven't been able to do that. And so Russell Westbrook in the starting lineup, solid tonight with his 14 points and 9 boards. But he had some dumb turnovers. So where you're trying to do too much. And that's what happens sometimes. You had the one where Gordon tries to throw the lob to MPJ and it goes out of bounds. It's like sometimes you just need to make easy plays. But this goes back to what we were talking about. Ray Montez, he said, I love how Malone preaches defense. It's just something this team doesn't do. And it's a problem that he's had last year and certainly the championship year. Championship year, they were a top 5 defense. Last year, they were number 8 in the league. Over the last month, they've been a top 5 defense. Of late, they certainly haven't. And it's about being able to do it consistently. And certainly in times when you need it. And they were able to cut the lead to 6, cut it to 4, but they just couldn't get over that hump. Obviously, they had the lead in the third quarter. And so I think that it's got to be maddening to Malone and his staff, but Malone specifically, because we thought we were kind of past this based on the defense they were playing. And even when they beat Atlanta here and gave up 120, they scored 150 or whatever it was. And so I think you live with that just because that's kind of the way the game's flowing. You're not going to get on guys if you win by 30, if you give up 120 too much. But they want to be giving up 103, 106, 99. That's where Malone wants to live because he knows his team's going to score enough, even if they aren't prolific from 3, and get easy buckets because that's what Joker does. It's what Russell Westbrook does. And I think that it's going to continue to be a story until it's not. So we'll see against Philly. Do they come out and beat the brakes off them like they did here, basically? Corey Simmons has another comment that Jokic was a no-show, the so-called best player in the world, should score 25 or 30 a game. Well, he does. The foul trouble certainly threw him off. And then going 6 of 15, just not his night. But it's going to take a string of bad games from Joker before you're going to be overly critical of him, because he truly is the best player on the planet. And I was having this conversation with somebody today, going back to, this game was on ESPN tonight. Saturday's game was only on ABC. And so if you're watching the halftime show and a little bit pregame with Stephen A. Smith and Bob Myers and Kendrick Perkins and Malik Andrews, they get into the MVP conversation and it comes up about Joker. And Kendrick Perkins, who was the king of the Joker haters and essentially helped get Joel Embiid that MVP a couple of years ago. He's reversed course so much. You talk about a 180 where as they got into the MVP conversation and Stephen A says Joker's amazing, but I'm voting for SGA this year, especially when you look at what they're doing in the West. Chet Holmgren's been banged up. Hartenstein's been banged up, and he's been doing it not on his own, but he's been doing it without those guys. And Chet Holmgren was number 1 overall pick. So you understand that it's a credit that SGA is able to have such a big lead in a really tough conference where every night is a battle, that they're able to keep winning these games. And so that's what Stephen A says. Comes back to Perk and he says, well, we're not even talking about MVPs with Joker. Now we're talking about something above the MVP. Is he one of the top 5 centers of all time? And this is where I'll give Shaq credit. And Liv and I have talked about this when Shaq said this on the podcast a couple months ago. And I imagine he'll continue to say it if he hasn't said it on NBA on TNT on Tuesdays or Thursdays. But he has Joker in the top 5 and took himself out. He has Joker ahead of him. And Joker has those 3 MVPs. Now, Shaq at his most dominant, you don't want to have to deal with them, whether you're Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem, Joker, or otherwise. But he has those guys I just mentioned, Kareem, Wilt. He has Kareem, Wilt. I want to say he has Bill Russell and has Olajuwon and then Joker, but not himself. You can get into the semantics of that debate. Joker is the best player on the planet. And so you're not going to spend a lot of time beating him up. Fernando says they won't beat Philly the way they're playing the last 3 games. That's a fair point, because Tyrese Maxey will come to play and he'll go get his 30 and if they have the right effort with the rest of the crew around them. We saw where they beat the Lakers last night. I get that AD got hurt, right? That I think I'm fairly certain they won they won that game. But either way, the Sixers, even without Embiid and a banged up Paul George, still could absolutely on Friday win this game on Friday in the city of brotherly love. Saturday they'll go to Charlotte, where we know, again, a winnable game, but that doesn't mean that they're going to win. Jay helping me with the schedule. So yeah, on top of those 2 road games where you at least want to go 2-3 by 2-3 on this 5-game swing. You want to win in Philly, go down to Charlotte Saturday night. They've been so good on the second night of back-to-backs. Can they keep that up? Then you get to go Monday, Pelicans, Wednesday, Pelicans, Thursday, Jamal Mosley, former CU Buff, Tristan Da Silva, former CU Buff, who's part of the rookie game, the Rising Stars Challenge at All-Star Weekend because he's played so well for Orlando as they're getting healthier. That is a week from tomorrow. The Magic will be here. I will be down in New Orleans for the Super Bowl, but we will certainly be keeping an eye on it. Liv's going to be down there too, and we'll have you covered all things Nuggets like we always do. But they just need to – you would have thought – I guess you can't think that Monday's rock bottom, but now 3 in a row when they haven't lost 3 in a row all season. And the last time they lost 2 in a row, and I actually think Liv actually looked it up and she texted me, was against the Suns and Cavs earlier this year. And so it's been a minute since they've lost back-to-back games. Yeah, Phoenix and Cleveland. Well, they haven't lost 3 all year. And good teams really don't lose 3 in a row very often. And the Nuggets haven't lost 3 in a row very often in the modern era, if you will. In the last few years with the way Joker's played in the MVP era, we could go back and I'm sure it's a handful of times, if at all. I know that they haven't lost 4 in a row very much. And so I think that we can all exhale on Friday if they go out and take care of business. As Corey acknowledges, if y'all are reading the comments yourself, he's pissed off. You should be. When you have that kind of effort against a team that you should have run out of the gym on Monday and then followed up with a loss tonight where foul trouble messes things up and silly turnovers at tough times or, inopportune times. Not that there's ever a great time for a turnover. You're allowed to be pissed off. And we know how every win and every loss is going to matter in the record book, even if they're feeling better about, I say record book, in the standings come playoff time. You feel better about them kind of locking into 4th place. Well, 4th place means that in the second round they're going to OKC. And that is not going to be easy. As people are bringing up trade ideas, and this is a name that I heard actually could be traded. Fernando says, I love MPJ, but the way Levine is playing, need to consider that trade unless you can get rid of Zeke and Saric. Well, you can get rid of Zeke and Saric. And Saric had played well till he got to Denver. There might be a world where Saric is the one name I heard that you might really be able to trade. I think the concern with MPJ not only is his inconsistency, but will his medicals scare other teams off, as they probably should? And so I don't think MPJ, you're going to get the best version of MPJ here, I think, as opposed to somewhere else, if you could actually trade him. So I don't think that you're going to trade MPJ. As you guys are getting into the standings conversation, it feels like Houston is ripe for the picking to jump them, and you'll see what happens with Memphis. So there's a world, and this is part of what we do. I remember going back last year where the Nuggets were playing in Cleveland, different Cleveland team, although they were, I think, the 4th seed in the East. I'm watching the game at a sports bar with some friends. My buddy Paulie's like, here we go. Because they were down like 8 or something, or 12 in the first half. And we know how they fell behind in the first half last year a bunch. Or maybe it was early third quarter. Either way, I was like, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. They've got the best player on the planet. They'll be fine. And they won by like 8 or 10 or 12. And so they're going to get back on track. It's just when you string losses together versus sprinkling in a loss. Had they beaten the T-Wolves and the Bulls and then lost tonight in the Garden, say, oh, well, that happens. Or even lose to Minnesota, get back on track, lose by 10 in a game where you're, I don't say going back and forth with the Knicks, because you really weren't. You were behind, and you're behind a lot. Then you made it close. Then you jumped ahead, let that slip away in no time, and then you were behind. and then you got a little close, but you're behind. I think you can stomach that. You can start sounding the alarms Friday night if they lose to the Philadelphia 76ers, because then that's a four straight loss. But I do think they're going to be fine, because I think they're one of the only teams that can win in the playoffs, and I think Vegas thinks that as well. That's why they have the fourth or fifth lowest odds to win a championship. No one believes in Houston. No one believes in Memphis yet. It's the Celtics, and it's obviously OKC. Dallas still is right there in the mix, although their injuries will potentially derail that. No one's got Houston up there. Grizzlies might be up there, but that's just so they don't lose money if someone decides to lay money on them. But as Corey points out, that Jokic has played 2 bad games in a row. And Monday being Serbian night, and knowing what a big deal that is in Chicago, it's the biggest Serbian population outside of Serbia. I'm sure it didn't sit well with him. And then, you know what they have in New York? Folks from all over the world, but I guarantee you there are plenty of Serbians there tonight. I'm sure if there were wide shots of the crowd, and I would just happen to be watching the game on ESPN, just because I had my ESPN app on my iPad. And maybe altitude gave us a better look at the crowd. That maybe there were, there had to be some Joker Serbia jerseys that we saw. And so it's hard for me to tell everybody to exhale, but that was sort of the point I was bringing up about the story last year. The Nuggets are better than most teams. They aren't playing like it. They aren't playing good defense consistently. They're turning the ball over when they don't need to, where it's not necessarily always good defense. It's more lazy or crappy passing. And so I think that they'll get back on track on Friday. And so it's easy for me to say that. It's obviously harder for them to do. But as you sit here right now, I guess we can mark this down at almost 8:45 Mountain Time. I think they're going to be okay. And I promise if we come back together either Friday or Saturday after the Charlotte game, and they've won those 2, you'll calm down a little. And then they'll have winnable games against the Pelicans, even with Zion healthy. And so they just need to win more than they lose. And that goes without saying, but that's what they've been doing. That's why they're 28-19 now. But if we project that out, and we know I'm not great at math, but that's another whatever. That makes them at 50, 56, 57 wins. And that's probably going to be enough. Well, I guess more like 54, 55 wins because of the 19 losses. That'll be right where they were. I want to say they were in a 3-way tie last year. They all had 57 wins. Does that sound right? Nobody's, in the East, I guess. Cleveland might win 70. But nobody's winning 70 games. No one's winning 65 games. OKC may give a run at 65. But they're going to be fine. So I feel like I sometimes have to be, and I do this with Liv all the time, but I feel like I have to be the Nuggets therapist for all of our great followers here on all of our Guerrilla Sports platforms, because I do think they're going to be fine because they have the best player in the world. And even though we can look at 5 straight games in a row with 5 triple doubles and all that, and through the first 3 quarters, then we're not even going to remember the times that he's had, or how many times he had bad stretches that have lasted more than 2 games. It just doesn't happen. It hasn't happened. And so Jay says no panic necessary. We can get into what would they look like without MPJ, and we're going to have another episode of Off Court tomorrow. Hopefully Liv can make it. Again, she's not feeling great, so if she skips it, then you'll get me. You'll get probably our pal Ruben, who works with us at Gorilla, who's as big a Nuggets fan as Liv, if not a bigger one, goes to almost every game as a fan and sits in the stands and goes nuts. But we're going to get into the trade stuff. I will say this. They lose MPJ via trade. Tell me who they're getting back. But while Zach LaVine gives you scoring, he doesn't play better defense than MPJ. He doesn't rebound better, and he's not going to block more shots, and he's not necessarily a better three-point shooter. Maybe a better scorer, and certainly explosive at the rack, even though he's a couple inches shorter than MPJ. But if that's the trade, I don't think you're noticeably better, and I think your rotation gets more screwed up because you're already not sure how you're working these guards coming off the bench and where CB fits and all that. And so, and then you're on the hook for a bunch more money. Well, I guess MPJ makes a lot of money too. I just don't think they're going to I just don't think they're going to do anything that drastic. I think if Bruce Brown becomes available, that they would have no problem getting rid of Zeke Najee to make the money work and bringing Bruce back. And I understand that crowds the backcourt too, but you don't have to play him the same way you have to play a Zach LaVine. If you trade for Zach LaVine, you have to start him at the 3, even though he's basically a 2 guard. So then you're playing Russ, Jamal, and Zach LaVine. That's 0 perimeter defense. It's crazy to think that MPJ's perimeter defense or just defense in general is wanted, but at 6'10", especially when he's active, he's just going to do more than Zach LaVine's going to do. And so I think that over time, things will calm down. I just don't think, and the trade deadline's next week. They pushed it up. It's next week. It normally is around the All-Star game, and now it's before the Super Bowl. I'm going to say it's February 6th. So I know Calvin Booth's working the phones. I guess the question is not MPJ. If there's a piece out there that makes sense, and I'm not going to say Zach LaVine, are you okay with the idea of losing Christian Brown or Peyton Watson? And I don't know if Nuggets fans are ready for that. I'm not saying that's going to happen. And so as you guys are bagging on MPJ and Fernando says MPJ has regressed, I think it's just kind of game to game. And I think that there's a chance that he's getting the most out of his body as he possibly can. And if they can find a taker out there, I wouldn't hate it, only because if he is on the decline, you're worried that he's not going to be able to perform anywhere near what you need, but also that you've seen the best. You've gotten the best from him. You got it 2 years ago, especially in the run to the finals. And even though he didn't shoot the ball well at all against Miami, he was really active on the glass and really active defensively. So who are the defensive pieces out there that you could trade for? As Marcel's now jumping in here and he says, we need defense. Yeah, you do need defense, but I don't know, beyond someone like Bruce Brown or KCP, and I'm just throwing out guys that we're familiar with, I don't know how many like lockdown defenders are just available via trade, especially in a world where we know that defense is but is primarily driven by effort and communication. And this team is too smart, and it has the smartest basketball player on the planet, who happens to be the best player. Apologies to LeBron, but Joker's the smartest basketball player out there. He knows the answer to every test. He's the one calling out, especially against the T-Wolves, because Chris Finch runs all their stuff. But he's the one calling out the other team's set as they're running it. And so you hear guys talk about that he's calling out the play and telling everybody where someone's going. So, but it can't just be Joker and it can't just be Russ. It has to be everyone buying in, all 1 through 9, 1 through 10, whoever's on the court on a given night. And that's been the problem, especially it is glaring, even if Russ and Joker are playing the right way defensively and Christian Brown is and AG is, if you're not getting it from Jamal consistently, if you're not getting it from MPJ, if you're not getting it from Strawler when he comes off the bench, Peyton Watson's going to play hard defense, but doesn't mean he can't get lost sometimes. And so I think that you just need to weather the storm, I guess is the best way to look at it. And I'm not pressing the panic button, but I will have my finger firmly near it if they lose Friday, especially depending on how they lose. Like if they get run out of the gym, if they lose on a buzzer beater and they're going back and forth and you're getting a huge game from Maxey and from some of those other dudes, Eric Gordon, has a renaissance and plays like he did, coming out of college and when he was with the Rockets and had some huge games. But I'm not pressing the panic button. I get that you're allowed to, so I'm not gonna bag on you. I'm just here to try to calm you down. And as I see you guys going at each other in the chat, which is also, it's worth noting, one of my favorite things about getting to interact with all of our great viewers and listeners at Gorilla is that you guys go at each other. And as long as we keep it civil, it's always pretty fun. But the idea that is Ingram out there, and I said this when his name hit the trade block. If you can trade for Ingram, even if he's in the last year of his deal and you're going to go into the second apron firmly, but if you can trade MPJ for Brandon Ingram, that's a different deal. And it's not that Brandon Ingram's going to play better defense, but it just gives you, I think, when healthy, more consistency. He has been an all-star. It was just one time as an all-star, but he's still been an all-star. So when you look at Brandon Ingram's numbers, and I can pull his numbers up next to Joker's, but he's averaging, next to MPJ, he's averaging 22, 5.6 on the glass, 5.2 assists. He's 27 years old, so he's a little younger than MPJ. And he's got that 7'3" wingspan. He's making $36 million, so you're going to have to up him, but you'll be paying him kind of about what you would be paying MPJ anyway. And so and it may not be an even player swap. There may be a couple other teams involved. There are rumors out there that the Raptors could be in the mix, and that could still be good for Bruce Brown, because if the Raptors include Bruce Brown in the trade and he gets bought out in New Orleans, then Bruce Brown could still end up here. But if you could get Brandon Ingram, that excites me way more than Zach LaVine, because I just don't think Zach LaVine adds enough and can't replace MPJ in the rotation, if you will. Like, obviously he can play, but I'm saying in terms of how you want to run your team, run your offense, keep your personnel groupings, I guess is the best way to say it. But 24 points, less than 5 boards, 4.5 assists, shooting a little bit better from the field than Brandon Ingram does. But Zach LaVine's contract also pays him a lot more. So it's a different kind of trade, because let me see exactly what his contract is. But at last check, it's $43 million. So he's making $8 million more a year, and it's going to keep going up. It's $45 million and then $48 million. So he has 2 more years. He's got that player option. I guess he could opt out. I wouldn't. And I just don't want to make a move to make a move if I'm Calvin Booth, because not that Calvin Booth is listening to our show or watching us or listening to the comments that are out there, but to make a move just to make a move seems, I don't call it hasty, because it's not like it's just going to happen out of the blue. But I don't know if Calvin Booth is going to pull the trigger on a deal that doesn't have long-term benefit. And part of it is that if you don't re-sign Brandon Ingram, well, then you're moving MPJ. That will give you a little more flexibility, I think, down the road too. But if you're trading for Brandon Ingram and it works, then you do want to re-sign him. And that kind of goes back to the conversation that Liv and I have a lot. And I do need to bump into Josh Kroenke and just ask him, because it is always easy. That's kind of the number one thing in sports, is we have no problem spending other people's money. So, hey, the Broncos, they're going to get a new stadium because they've got the richest owners in the NFL, second richest owners in pro sports in America. Okay, fine. Well, that's nice of us to spend the Walton Penner family ownership group money. Why aren't the Nuggets going into the second apron, the third apron, when Stan Kroenke, all he does is make money with all of his teams and his other business holdings, and and Josh and his sister will obviously inherit that from Stan and their mom, who's Rob Walton's cousin. And why wouldn't they spend more money? But the argument is, when you've got Nikola Jokic, and the hardest thing in the world to do is win a championship in a given sport, why wouldn't you be willing to spend X number of dollars? And they're, I think, $7 million shy of the second apron next year. I heard with the AG deal, it put them there, but then when I looked it up, it looks like they're still under it. But why wouldn't you go into that with the extra money that comes with it? And I guess I should double check that. So before I go to off court tomorrow with you guys, I'll see if I can find that info. But I think that when you have Nikola Jokic for, we'll call it 3 to 10 more years, but certainly 3 more years in the maximum of his prime. We understand that the Joker doesn't live above the rim, so he doesn't have to do what LeBron's doing at age 40 necessarily, or you won't need to marvel at it, because he's just going to keep doing what he's doing. But when you're 29, 30, 31, 32, that's truly when you're in your prime. Ask any athlete ever, I guess not named Tom Brady, but any athlete, certainly Michael Jordan, certainly any basketball player you can think of, why wouldn't it be worth going into the second apron? Or if you had the pieces and needed to go into the third apron to keep Christian Brown, to keep Peyton Watson, whatever it ends up being, why wouldn't you do it for just a couple of years to make sure you were doing the best you could to surround Nikola Jokic and the rest of his teammates but Joker specifically with the best possible cast of characters around him, because not only the Nuggets have had some great players. And so you'll go through David Thompson, his own problems on and off the court, but phenomenal player. Alex English, Hall of Fame kind of player. Then good players. Then Carmelo Anthony is a Hall of Fame player. Carmelo is one of the top 5 to 7 best scorers probably to ever walk the earth. Talk about getting an easy bucket. You had Carmelo. But the gap between Alex English and Carmelo was very wide. The gap between Carmelo and Joker was a lot less. Now, you didn't know Joker was going to be this. He wasn't a top 5 pick. He wasn't a college All-American. He came over. He was overweight from overseas. You give Tim Conley credit. I remember my man Paul Klee from the Gazette going, "Hey, see that guy in the corner? That guy's going to be an all-star." I'm like, the chubby dude in the corner when they've got Nurkic and they got those. I'm like, oh, okay, fine. You hear it and you're like, whatever. That sounds dumb. Well, that was underselling it. He's been one of the best players of all time, but they don't come along very often in any sport for any team. And you go through every team. Not everybody's the Lakers, who somehow manages to just acquire a Hall of Famer after a Hall of Famer. The Nuggets are kind of the best example. But look, I grew up in Dallas. The Mavericks had some good players. They drafted Jason Kidd. He's a Hall of Famer. Jamal Mashburn and Jim Jackson were good players. Guys before them, Mark Aguirre, good players. Detlef Schrempf, guys like that. But they had Dirk, and now they have Luka. So in the 40-plus year history, they've had 2 Hall of Famers. Look at the Knicks. The Knicks, I'm talking about transcendent players. It's like you had those teams in the 70s, but Earl Monroe, I guess, would have been it. Then Ewing. Then what? Jalen Brunson now and Cat at this point of his career. But the point is, you just don't get them. Look at Chicago. You had Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and obviously a little bit of Dennis Rodman. And you had Artis Gilmore in the 70s, and that was it. So to waste Joker's prime is extremely, extremely risky, I guess, if that's the best way, or it would just be a shame. Risky's not the right word. It would just be a shame. And so I'll let you guys continue to fight this out. Yeah, Mahmoud Abdul, great shooter. He was not a transcendent player. Transcendent figure in sports, that's a different conversation, but not a transcendent player. The Bucks had Oscar Robertson and Kareem. I'm just thinking about guys that changed their name. And then you had to go all the way until Ray Allen was a Buck, and he wasn't there very long. Big Dog was a good player, never really lived up to the Hall of Fame stature that you thought he could maybe get to. And then now the Greek Freak. The point is, you just don't find Hall of Fame transcendent players. They just don't grow on trees. And so DJ Seahawk wants to know, this is where we'll end it. Hey, when will Liv be feeling better? Great question. I'm not a doctor. I don't know if she knows. I know that she was worried that she might have COVID, took a COVID test. It isn't that, but she does have a fever and isn't feeling great. I don't need to get any more into her medical condition because I don't want to say HIPAA laws because I'm not her boss. So it's not necessarily that. It's just that I don't know when she's going to feel better. Hopefully by tomorrow, and she'll be on off court with us, but we'll know more tomorrow. If not, then maybe by post-game Friday, we will see. And certainly by next week when she's headed to New Orleans for the Super Bowl coverage for us and for her friends at FanDuel and talk to our pal Debo for Bleacher Report. So I appreciate every single one of you rocking with us. Over 2,000 strong. And it means a lot to us here at Guerrilla Sports that you care so much about our coverage, and it's just going to get better as we get into the spring. We're not only going to be at home games, we'll start, being live at games on the road and into the playoffs, and hopefully we'll see another championship parade here for the Denver Nuggets. So thank you for everybody for rocking with me. Tough Nuggets night, tough stretch so far on this road trip, going 0-3, but hopefully they will get it figured out between now and Friday night in Philly. They'll have a good Philly cheesesteak tomorrow on their way down, hit up Pat's or Gino's or Jim's or whatever it may be, although I think Jim's may have burned down. But either way, it's been awesome hanging with you. And I guess I do need to thank my friends at Trusted American Mortgage real quick before we get out of here. And we know that Trusted American is looking to try to save you money. So you can go to trustedamerican.com and their mortgage specialist will help you find the best possible mortgage rate right now and not have to potentially make a mortgage payment for a couple of months. Now you're still recovering from all of that holiday spending. And so I think that Trusted American, I don't even know where the QR code is, so I'm not going to mess with it, but go to trustedamerican.com and click on that. Don't click on just go to trustedamerican.com. Click on the QR code next time it comes up. But thanks to trustedamerican.com. They will help cover the cost of your appraisal, which is about a $650 value. So thank you for rocking with us. We will see you tomorrow for Off Court, and then again post-game Friday night. And hopefully Liv's here for both. Hopefully she's here soon. So thanks to all of you. If I didn't get to your comments, I apologize, but I appreciate it. And we will catch you next time for tomorrow for Off Court, and then, of course, every single post-game. Thanks again.